Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Brittany and today we are in a winter storm warning where I live. So I thought that it would be a good day to do some plant chores, catch up on that. And when I came across this big pothos pot that I have, I discovered that we have an issue, kind of a good issue, but it is just getting so crowded in here that some of the leaves are having a hard time finding their way out of this mess. So I thought it would be fun to take some of this golden pothos that's in here out of this pot, off of this Coco coir pole, and put it onto a moss pole. Some of these are pretty large leaves, so I think it would be a great start to a moss pole. So that's what we're going to do today. If you are interested in this type of content, stick around and let's talk Coco coir versus moss poles. Okay, so I've got everything set up here that we are going to need in order to put this pothos on a pole. I did detach the vines that I want to use for this moss pole from that big pothos pot that I had. So I've got two vines here, pretty large. I did a marble queen recently and I had two much smaller vines. Golden pothos are a part of the pothos family. They grow these large green leaves with some variegation as well, kind of a golden-y color, hence the name. And these plants do vine, so if you want them to grow down, they'll vine. They also develop aerial roots that are used for climbing up trees in the wild. And so they'll grow up your wall, they'll grow up moss poles. And the reason that I wanted to take the golden pothos off of the Coco coir pole and put it onto a moss pole, you can see the difference here from the Coco coir pole that we showed earlier, is because the aerial roots will grow into the sphagnum moss, the wet moss that I just put into this pole. And the wet moss will then nourish those roots, and the root system becomes a part of the moss pole. So roots are growing into the moss pole, roots are growing into your pot with your soil or whatever you're using for your roots, and it becomes a part of it. So the leaves themselves will grow much bigger on a moss pole than they will on a Coco coir pole. The Coco coir, if you treat it really well, the roots might start to climb up it, but it isn't nourishing it, it isn't growing into it, and it's more of a support system for the plant as opposed to an actual development of those roots. So that is why we're changing from the Coco coir. I'm still leaving some on there to the moss pole. I just want to have the opportunity to grow this to its maximum potential in my home. So with that being said, here's what I've got going. I've got the plants, I've got the moss pole that I did make previous. I have a pot that this will all be going into. And then I do have my super chunky moss pole mix that I created. The point of having a really chunky mix is because you are watering the moss in the moss pole. The gravity brings that moisture down, and if it does end up in the soil, it's really chunky, really aerated. It's just allowing that water to flow through as opposed to sitting in that soil and potentially rotting the soil roots. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that I am going to do is to place a little bit of that soil here at the bottom of this moss pole. So as you can see, I only filled it in the middle, not at the bottom and not at the top. I want to have some room for this moss to not be sitting in the soil. So I'm gonna fill a bit of this with soil. That's gonna go in the pot. And then on the top end, as the plant grows up, I'll fill it with more moss. It's just kind of a lot to water, so I'm gonna do it minimal right now and then add to it as it grows. So the first step is going to be filling this part with soil. Okay, so I did get the soil into the moss pole. So you can see here, this is sphagnum moss. It is moist. This is soil. And I'm gonna go ahead and put this into the pot. And while I was filling it up, I did decide on going on a little bit smaller pot just because I was a little bit worried about the soil getting too moist. I don't want those roots sitting in a ton of wet soil, since the roots are going to be growing and getting nourishment from the pole as well. So I did decide to go a little bit smaller with my pot here, and I have that in there. I'm going to go ahead and add some of that soil to the actual pot itself to give a little base for those roots. We're going to go ahead and put that plant into the pot here, just kind of filling around gently. And I put the pole itself kind of centered in the pot because I want to have some stability here. So if I let go, I don't want it tipping over or going anywhere. And then let's take a look at these soil roots here. These are the roots that were in the soil in that moss pole pot itself. You can see that they are wanting to kind of grow out this direction. So this could have been an aerial root. If I put it into the moss sooner when it was smaller, it would have grown like this into the actual moss and gotten nourishment from that. Instead, it will be a soil root. And you can see here, there are some roots that are wanting to start growing out the back. So that is the side that I'm going to go ahead and put in to the moss, or secure into the moss, so it has that moisture. It can kind of put itself that direction. So I'm going to stick these soil roots right down into that pot. Like I said, with the roots that would like to be aerial roots going into the actual moss pole itself. And then I do have these little clips, butterfly clips, that work great for this. And I'm just going to secure that right where I saw those roots growing. There's a couple spots here, usually at the node. So the part where the leaf starts to grow off of, that's where you'll see those aerial roots as well. So the soil roots, I'm just kind of filling around, making sure that I still have that stability. We're looking a little crooked. There we go, that's better. And then I'm gonna do the same thing with this other one. We can see here, the roots are growing off the back this direction. There are some aerial roots. So I'm gonna do the same thing just on the other side of the pole, so they each have their own space that they can grow up. Okay, I got that in. My kiddos came down to say hey. So I got that in. I'm gonna add the butterfly clips right to those nodes, right where I had seen those roots coming out. There was one. And this one has a couple more leaves. So I'm gonna do one here. And then one right here as well. And then I'll just kind of move these around, make sure that they are all going the direction that I want them to. And they'll kind of adjust as I put a grow light on them, as I put the sunshine on them. They'll start growing out toward the sun. I will face it this direction, as you can see here. And then the next thing I want to do, you can see it's so insecure, it keeps kind of wiggling around, is I want to just really pack this soil mixture into this pot. And it's a little bit tight, so it's easier said than done, but I do want that tightness. So I'm going to really pack this in here, give it that security, get rid of all of those air pockets that could be down in there, causing issues for the root. So let me pack this in, and then I'll show you what it looks like once I'm done here. Okay, so I did get that soil all packed down in here. Now we have a lot of security with this. This thing is not going anywhere. It really is super stable, and all those soil roots are down into that soil. Those aerial roots are going to be growing into that sphagnum moss. In my last video, I didn't talk much about care of the actual moss itself. So what I do is every 2 to 3 days, I just take a little water bottle and I kind of slowly allow that to drain into the top of the moss. And I just watch as it drains down the entire moss pole. Once it gets close to the bottom, a few inches, I do take the water off because gravity will do the rest there. In terms of the watering of the soil itself, I just kind of feel for dryness. Sometimes the moss watering will keep the soil moist enough that you don't have to water it as often as you might your other pothos or your other plants that are not on moss. So just kind of listen to your plant. If it starts drooping heavily, give it some water in the soil. Once the sphagnum moss does dry out, you really want to make sure that you're watering it. Dry moss is not doing anything for those aerial roots, and if it's going to be dry, there's kind of no point to having it on this pole. So the biggest part is keeping the sphagnum moss moist. Like I said, the pole itself is an extension of the root system. So if this is dry, nothing else is going to be living up to its full potential. So as we go through the rest of the winter, spring into summer, I'm sure I will have to extend this pole, give it some more moss, and then eventually create an extension for the pole itself. And I'm excited to see what this guy does. Like I said, some of these leaves are already pretty, can you see, pretty giant. So as it grows and it has that nourishment, they're just going to hopefully keep getting bigger and bigger. So if you have any questions about moss poles or have any awesome tips, let's talk down in the comments. And if you will give this channel a subscribe, then we can keep up with this and my Marble Queen Pothos that is on a pole as well. And I hope to see you at my next video, and enjoy the rest of your day.